These brothers unsuspectingly made the purchase of a lifetime. It was a large piece of land on the outskirts of town. They were planning to build their own home there, but they did not expect this shed to still be present on the grounds. They opened it, and inside they found a hidden secret that revealed the identity of the former owner, a discovery that would change their lives forever. But before we start, smash the like button and make sure to subscribe if you haven't, and hit that notification bell so that you won't miss any new stories. Brothers Henry and Tom were on their way to their newly purchased piece of land. It was a thrilling drive, and both brothers couldn't wait to see what their investment had brought them. They got the place for basically nothing at an online auction, so maybe it was a bust. But still, the excitement was high. They arrived at the gate and took the first steps on their new property not much later. The terrain was rough, and Tom immediately saw that it needed much work. A structure stood in the middle of the land, a building they did not see on the map they received after the purchase. It looked like an old, rusty shed. It had seen better days, but it piqued their interest. So the brothers carefully approached the structure. They were going to break the lock open. Henry looked around for something that could help them and quickly found the solution to their problem. A steel pipe stuck out between some rubble, so he picked it up and shoved it between the lock's chains. Tom took a few steps back, wondering what his brother was planning. Henry twisted the pipe around several times and then pulled as hard as possible. It worked because, after a couple of tries, they heard the sweet sound of a chain bursting. "What do you think is inside?" Tom asked his brother with an excited look on his face. Henry didn't know, but he shared the same enthusiasm. They expected some power tools, but inside there waited an immense secret. The empty cabinets were full of mold had formed, and vegetation had overgrown most of the shed's innards. But there was something in the back that piqued their interest. In the right corner of the worn-down building, there were multiple large boxes, some with hanging locks, just like the shed had, but smaller, and some with no locks at all. Once outside, it was time to unlock their exciting findings. The boxes were old, but the details on them were intricate and well kept. It made them look way too important to just be tossed out to rot in a shed. And their insides proved it. The boxes were filled with documents, a complex-looking blueprint, and pictures of a man and his family, which didn't just look old, they looked ancient. The people's clothing in the picture was clearly not from a modern era. They saw black and white photos of a man supporting a considerable mustache, a woman in a corset, and a little girl holding a creepy doll. Then Tom removed all the files from the box. He even found what was left of the doll from the picture. "What is all this?" he said, staring at the doll. "These must have been the original owners of the land," Henry said in amazement. Then something on the blueprint caught Henry's attention. He saw what appeared to be the shed, but it seemed to be part of a much bigger house. But what really caught his attention was what was scribbled in the corner, a part that was clearly put on there as a finishing touch. It was the signature of the maker. The initials read RS. They were encased in an upside-down triangle, and something about it felt really familiar to Henry. Tom showed his brother the signature, and he also recognized the marking. The shed and these plans quickly became more important than the land they bought. So the two brothers stepped into their car and drove to the first place they could think of. The local library was the first stop on their road to discovery. It held a vast collection of books about the history of this town, and the Wi-Fi was way better here than back at home. The two brothers split up tasks and searched for hours, but unfortunately, their efforts seemed futile because they didn't find anything about the mysterious RS. They needed to find another way to find out more. With no other option left, The brothers agreed they needed outside help. Maybe someone in this town knew more about RS. So they decided to place an ad in the regional newspaper asking for help in their search for the mysterious RS. One day, early in the morning, the phone in Tom's house rang. It was 6:15 o'clock, and it was still dark outside. "Who called at this hour?" Tom wondered, slightly irritated. He picked up the phone, and on the other end, a man answered. Tom was surprised to hear the man was a historian. The historian explained that he called because of the ad. "I am convinced I can help you," he said. Tom was speechless. He couldn't believe what he just heard. So, without a moment of hesitation, he put on his clothes, jumped into his car, and drove over to his brother's house. It was 6:45 when he rang Henry's doorbell over and over again. Eventually, Henry opened the front door with a sleepy face. But his eyes lit up once Tom explained why he was there. "What are we waiting for? Let's go!" Henry shouted as he put on his coat. Once at the workshop of the historian, the two brothers were greeted by an elderly man. The old man told the brothers that the man they were looking for was named Robert Stevenson, the original owner of the land. "Stevenson? That is also our last name," Henry said in awe. The historian told them that Robert Stevenson was the wealthiest man in town, maybe even the entire region, and that he lived back in the 19th century. But besides his birth year and status, little was known about him. That caused the historian to be so fascinated by RS, and that's why he spent years of his life studying the mysterious man. The historian looked at the stuff the brothers brought with them and noticed there was a blueprint. He grabbed it and carefully looked at it. "I've got one of these as well," he said in a soft voice. Henry and Tom turned around and looked at the old man with big eyes. A second blueprint? What could be on there? After scrambling around in his closet for a few minutes, the old man pulled out a large sheet of paper. The brothers waited in anticipation and soon saw it was a blueprint of their land with a layout of the house in the center of it. It even had the same initials RS at the bottom right corner. Yet something was different. It was a perfect copy of theirs except for one detail. Henry was the first to spot the difference. "Don't you see it?" Henry asked while Tom and the historian still stared at the paper blindly. He grabbed the blueprint from the historian's hand and put one over the other, and as he held the stacked pieces of paper to the light, the others gasped. The historian's blueprint was missing a room. It was the exact spot where their shed stood. "Oh, God, you're right," the historian said. He told the men that after Robert Stevenson's death, all traces of his life seemed to have vanished. His guess was that this secret room, which lay in the exact location of the shed, might have something to do with it. There was no time to lose, so Tom and Henry quickly thanked the old man and told him they would keep in touch if they found something. Within minutes, both brothers were back in the car, on their way to the land and the shed they bought. Tom and Henry stood in the center of the shed and looked around. They had searched this place before, and it didn't bear much fruit back then, but they knew more now. The brothers opened every cabinet and flipped every object upside down, but they found nothing. Tom was still searching fervently, hoping to find some clue about the past room that stood here while Henry paced around. The sounds of his footsteps were dull due to the layer of dirt on top of the wooden planks until they weren't. Henry was so deep in thought that he didn't realize it, but eventually he noticed his footsteps sometimes sounded hollow instead. He stomped his foot on the ground to check. A dull thus was heard. Henry felt a surge of disappointment go through his body. Did he make things up? He was sure he heard a strange sound while walking. Henry moved a few steps and stomped again, repeating this process a few times. His actions caught the attention of Tom, who walked over, and then they heard it. After moving a few times, the hollow sound was heard. They looked at each other. "I think there is a hollow space underneath here," said Henry eventually. Disbelief drenched his voice. "Help me. he said as he stomped around to find out how big the space beneath was. There was at least a square foot that appeared hollow. After 15 minutes of hard work, the layer of dirt was finally cleared and the men stood silently for a moment, panting. With trembling hands, Henry and Tom reached for the handle of the old wooden hatch. Below, a dark hole with a ladder was revealed. The first 3 steps were visible, but after that, it was nothing but darkness. A cold breeze struck their face as the brothers tried to pierce the darkness. Henry took out his phone to open his flashlight, but it went out immediately as its battery was too low. Based on touch, they tried to navigate and decipher what was around them. Tom quickly grabbed the lamp off the wall, and Henry held the lighter close to the fuel basin. And then a miracle happened. The ancient oil in the lamp was still flammable and lit up the entire room. The brothers were overwhelmed by the sudden light and blinked frantically to adjust. When they opened their eyes and saw the room, they gasped and stood in silence, staring at each other. There was a dresser, a small cabinet, and a coffee table in front of a couch filled with teacups and plates. But something else caught their attention. Next to all the plates and cutlery, there were multiple old pictures. Henry wiped the dust off the couch and sat down to take a look at them. Most of them were of a young girl, but then Henry's heart suddenly skipped a beat. Slowly but surely, the realization dawned on them. "This has to be the secret room the historian was talking about," Tom said enthusiastically. There was no other option. But what had the old man said about it again? Everything about Stevenson's life vanished, and the room could help them find the truth. They were holding pictures of him right now, so they were on the right track. But what truth would they find? The brothers started to search the room but didn't know what to look for exactly. But to their disappointment, there was nothing but dust to be found. Henry's mind returned to the pictures which had so obviously been on the table. Why was everything so well kept except for those pictures? Then he recognized one of them. He picked it out and held it in front of Tom. "Do you recognize this?" he said. Tom's eyes widened, and both brothers eventually stared at the same point in the room. They also confirmed that the gold belonged to the brothers, as they were the direct descendants of Robert Stevenson. The historians couldn't believe what they had found and thanked them, but the brothers were still processing. They had just become rich. Henry and Tom felt they owed their ancestors something but didn't know how to honor their legacy. But eventually, they thought of the perfect way. They used the blueprints they had found to build a house on their land, replicating Stevenson's original design. It took them years to complete, and they even included the secret room. The brothers felt a strong connection between them and their ancestors, but the house wasn't all they did. Next to their new home, the brothers constructed a small museum. This museum housed all the antiques, documents, and the story of their incredible discovery. They invited the historian to manage the museum, and it became a place of learning and curiosity, attracting locals and tourists alike, eager to explore the rich history of Robert Stevenson in the area. The museum stood as a testament to their journey and the heritage they had uncovered. Years later, the brothers still lived on the property. They expanded it so their whole family could reside there. Looking back, buying the land changed the brothers' lives in ways they never imagined. It was not just a piece of property, but a doorway to their past and a bridge to their future. Thanks to their ancestors, the brothers could now provide for their family in ways they had never thought possible.